Hello and welcome to the Inner Coach Classroom with me, Emma Benyon. I'm a multi-certified coach and educator with over 13 years of experience within the education sector. This podcast is all about helping educators and leaders build their inner coach so they can become confident, self-aware, and transform how they work and lead. So, if you are an educator or leader, then you are in the right place for coaching, mindset, and reflection. So, this week I wanted to chat with you about something that comes up with a lot of my clients, and you might notice it in yourself too. And that is starting again, and maybe even starting again. And with that, what I mean is the kind of start, stop phase, which many of us go through because we might be juggling it all. We might be working full time, working part time, might be juggling childcare, family commitments, alongside being an educator or leader. And actually, what we are struggling with within this is to keep up that consistency. And I struggled with this for a long time too, with working full time and also trying to run my coaching business alongside it too, whilst being a mum and a step parent and trying to fit everything in. And with that, then comes that feeling of guilt that you're not able to be consistent. And, it's something that I see time and time again and support my clients with. And sometimes this stop, start, maybe it's something within our job, but often it is, building those self-care practices to support ourselves or trying to work towards a goal that we set ourselves. And one of the reasons why we find it so difficult to be consistent is because of those goals that we've set ourselves, whether it's a self-care practice, whether it is I don't know, a facial routine, whatever it might be. It's because those goals that we set ourselves are often too big. And by that, I mean that overarching goal that we have, that dream, that vision. Maybe it's that career progression, maybe it's to be able to have this by this time. What we haven't done with that big overarching vision and why it becomes so big is that we've not actually broken it down into the smaller steps that are going to allow us to get there. And so building the habit of being consistent is really difficult when we don't have those small stepping stones to get us there. So when we think about this in terms of potentially, creating that to-do list every week, it might be that on a Monday morning, like what we want is just to have everything nailed, all of our week's plan, and just to be able to show up in all of those things really consistently. It's all working really smoothly. And then all of a sudden something happens, maybe we get a call from someone who needs us, or maybe our kids are ill and we have to go and pick them up from school. Something gets in the way of us being consistent, and then we end up starting again in a week or two, a month later, and feeling like we're back to square one. That guilt and the pressure and the expectation all come along with that too. And it can be really difficult and feel really difficult to pick back up where we left. Now, one of the things that I teach my clients when I'm working with them is that what we need to be doing is to setting up a simple yet effective, flexible schedule, so that actually when we're doing all of these things and we're building these habits, actually, if it falls down one day, it doesn't feel like it's the end of the world and that you can't pick it back up again. And often we talk about this as being like an experimentation that actually, so we'll start with this habit and we talk about a self-care habit, for example, and maybe that is, taking 5 minutes away from our computer at lunchtime to support our well-being, support us being able to focus in the afternoon. We're going to come away from our computer and we're going to try and do that every day when we're at work. Yet sometimes things happen and maybe, we put in to do it at 12 o'clock. Yeah, we actually need to be in a meeting at 12 o'clock. And so what happens is that day that it just doesn't happen. And then the next day, we're like, well, it didn't happen yesterday, so I'm not going to be able to keep this up. Actually, we also need to add in this element of flexibility there that actually, okay, so Tuesday, I'm in a meeting at 12. Okay, well, I could do it when I come out of the meeting at 1 o'clock. It may take 5 minutes then. But Wednesday, look, 12 o'clock again, that can work. Thursday, maybe need to be a little bit flexible again. And all of a sudden, in 3-4 weeks' time, that habit of actually being flexible, taking that 5 minutes at lunchtime will become second nature because we've allowed that flexibility. We've allowed ourselves that compassion to be able to work through that and build that habit up so that actually we don't feel like we're stopping and starting. What we're doing is we're being flexible with meeting those goals and taking those small stepping stones to get there. And I'm going to talk about goal setting in a future episode of the podcast, because actually setting really clear intentional goals with small steps will really help us to achieve more of what we want in our lives. So what I'd like you just to really consider is just to remember to be kind and compassionate to yourself. Think about actually, okay, it's not about starting and stopping again. It's about being flexible and building that simple yet effective strategy, just to build on one thing at a time, to build that consistency, build that habit over time, because it doesn't happen overnight. We've got to give ourselves time to really embed that in. So I hope you found that useful today, thinking about how we can reframe that idea of stopping and starting and feeling like we're not getting anywhere, and actually bring in that really simple tool of being more flexible with ourselves and just continuing from where we left off. So thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I love to hear your reflections from this. So why not come and chat to me over on my socials, on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, over at emmabenyon.coach. And you can find the links in the show notes too. And if you have enjoyed this episode, why not share it with a friend or colleague, and make sure you subscribe and follow so you don't miss out on the next one. So let's continue to build your inner coach together, one episode at a time.